I'm delighted to introduce our Strand 6 plenary speaker, Gail Ellis. Gail is an independent teacher, educator and advisor. Her main interests include children's rights, picture books in primary ELT, young learner ELT management, and inclusive practices. Her most recent publication is Teaching English to Pre-Primary Children with Sandie Mourão, published by Delta Publishing and Klett in 2020, and a finalist in this year's 2021 ELTons. Gail is also co-founder of PEPELT, Picturebooks in European Primary English Language Teaching. During Gail's plenary, we recommend viewing in Speaker View, and if you have any questions for Gail, please put them in the Q&A box. Without any further ado, over to you. Please share your screen, Gail.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Just a moment. Where is it? Oh gosh.
The green one at the bottom, Gail. Share screen.
Yes, I've. Sorry. Oh, where's my presentation gone? Is that it?
If you just put it on to present, that's it. Excellent, thanks.
Yes, it comes through, excellent. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, David, for that introduction, and also thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this event. So I think the title of my talk, my plenary, is Integrating a Rights Perspective, Children's Language Learning Rights, and I do hope you were able to listen to Maria Verges's Inspire session, because it has given me a fantastic lead into this, this subject. So before I get going with my talk, I'd first of all like to acknowledge the amount of time and energy that so many young learner professionals have put into the past 35 years to make the IATEFL YLT SIG what it is today. So happy Emerald Anniversary, YLT SIG. So this is what I would like to do during this talk. As a point of entry, we're going to have a look at a statement from UNICEF. I'd then like to look at some of the issues which may impact on the extent we implement or do not implement children's rights in the English language classroom. I'd then like to give some examples of children's rights in practice in English language classrooms from around the world. I'll give a brief historical background to learner-centered learning and learner agency, and then look more specifically at children's language learning rights. And to finish, I'll share some resources that you can use to create an awareness of children's rights. So I'm not sure how much everybody knows about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, how many articles there are. Well, there are 54 articles, and this child-friendly version here has 42 articles. And articles 43 and 54 are not included because they explain how governments and international organizations like UNICEF will work to ensure children are protected with their rights. So I'll say a little bit more about the convention later on, but the statement from UNICEF, children's rights generate obligations and responsibilities that we must all honor and respect. Now, this means that implementing children's rights should form part of our wider professional remit in the English language classroom, and that our role expands beyond that of pedagogy alone. So let's have a look at this continuum. To what extent do you consider you implement children's rights in your English language classrooms? Not at all, rarely, partially, mostly, always, or perhaps you're not sure. Where would you place yourself on this continuum? Reflect on this. You can put your responses in the chat box if you want to, but you don't have to. But what I would like you to do is, wherever you place yourself, think why this is. Oops, sorry. Actually, I can't see the chat box. How do I see the chat box? Ah, discussion. Mostly. Oh, very good. Fantastic. Rarely. Okay. Rarely. The curriculum doesn't include such topics. That's interesting. It's not just about topics, actually. It's about implementing the rights. It might depend on the task. Okay. All right. Let's come back. Let's consider some of the issues that can possibly account for where you placed yourself on the continuum, and which will impact on the extent to whether we implement children's rights or not and promote their agency. Why can't I move my, okay, right. So the first one then is how we conceive and value the child. In other words, what is our image of the child and of childhood? And what are our beliefs and values that we hold around children's learning? Do we conceive the child as an active learner who is a social agent capable of reflection and decision-making with rights and responsibilities, or as dependent on the teacher and as a passive recipient of knowledge? Sometimes some teachers may feel that children are just too young and not capable of expressing their views and opinions about their learning, or of participating in making decisions and choices about their learning. But what I'd like to do now is to share a quote with you from Janusz Korczak, the Polish advocate of children's rights. And he said, if we are constantly astonished at the child's perceptiveness, it means that we do not take them seriously. I think that's a fantastic quote, and it's in the preface to Listening to Young Children by Alison Clark. And just for your information, all my references are at the end of my talk on the slides. Okay, so the next issue is that there is mainly a lack of focus on children's rights in children's education, which means that some teachers may feel they don't have the professional attributes, the skills or knowledge to implement children's rights, and they may feel that this is beyond their role as a teacher, and they may also feel that their authority may be undermined. Tony Jeffs, in his book Schooling, Education and Children's Rights, describes the school system sorry, I've gone to the wrong one. So that was about the lack of children's rights in teacher education, and the fact that some teachers may feel that their authority may be undermined. And then the next one is to do with organizational constraints. Schools are highly structured organizations. Teachers may feel confined by organizational constraints such as restrictive curricula, prescribed teaching materials, rigid assessment systems and targets, rules and regulations, which may make it seem difficult to give over some agency and control to pupils. And Tony Jeffs, in his book Schooling, Education and Children's Rights, describes the school system as authoritarian, repressive and standardized. And the final issue, well, there may be more, but these are the ones I've highlighted, are the varying cultural, linguistic, educational, and socio-political forces at work in our different contexts, as well as the varying experiences, realities, and expectations of teachers, parents, and pupils in different parts of the world. So all of these issues will influence the power dynamics and relations between the adult and the child. So where would you place yourself on this continuum? Are you more authoritative as a teacher, as authority, where there's an unequal relationship, which places the child in a more subordinate and passive role? Or are you more democratic, a teacher as partner, where learning is a shared process, respecting the equal status of children as the subjects of rights? So what I would like to do now is to give some concrete examples of how children's rights have been implemented in English classrooms, English language classrooms around the world, and where certain articles from the United Convention's Right of the Child have been applied. So as I said earlier, there are 54 articles, and this is a child-friendly version of the convention, and it was developed in 1989. So it's been in existence for just over 30 years now. So let's have a look at example one. This is an early years example. 4-year-old pre-primary children in a state school in Girona, Catalonia, Spain, were asked their views on introducing a new English language area into their classroom to provide opportunities for free play. The children's ideas were taken into account and their help enlisted in deciding the most suitable location for the area and the furniture needed to store the material. Any ideas on which article is being demonstrated here, or articles? Any idea? I'm looking in the chat box. No problem if okay, so let me elucidate you. This is an example of how, oh God, my PowerPoint isn't working. Okay. This is an example of how Articles 12 and 31 have been applied. Article 12 gives children the right to give their opinion and for adults to listen and to take it seriously. This example foregrounds children's voices and identifies their views and preferences. And Article 31 gives children the right to play and rest. So the creation of an English language area in the classroom allowed for a balance between and child-initiated free play, as play lies at the heart of early childhood education. And this comes from work and research that Julie Waddington and her colleagues have conducted in Girona. So as I say, all my references, my full references will be at the end. Okay, let's have a look at another example, another early years example. A pre-primary child in China and his teacher are learning with and from each other. Daniel, the teacher, asks Dong Dong to correct his pronunciation of the Mandarin Shui. I have no idea if I pronounced that right. I need Dong Dong to help me. So if you look at the little the text here, on line 5, Daniel says, "See, you teach me again. Oh, I remember we saw some purple water. I am going to try if I can say it correctly. Can you turn back? Let's go to the page with the purple water. Here it is. Could that be shui? What is purple in Mandarin?" Now, this example shows how Article 30 has been applied, which gives the children the right to use their own language. And here, by collaborating as co-learners, Dong Dong's own language, Mandarin, is valorized as he is respected as a competent learner, capable of sharing and teaching his own language and providing feedback, as suggested, I think, by his expression. Does that say room for improvement? So co-learning contributes to developing awareness of the two languages, English and Mandarin, and creating positive relationships between English and the child's own language, as well as establishing a positive relationship between the child and the teacher. And this comes from work by Li Juan Shi and will appear as a chapter in a forthcoming publication, which is edited by David Valent and Daniel Sherry. So moving on, example 3 from primary. 8-year-olds in France negotiated their class rules at the beginning of the school year and agreed to commit to and be accountable for these throughout the year. Now, this example shows any ideas? Any ideas if you know which article that demonstrates? No, I don't think so, or I can't see the comments. So anyway, so this shows how Article 19 has been applied. Right, I'm not going to go into discussion again because it doesn't allow me to come back to my PowerPoint very well. So this example shows then how Article 19 has been applied, which gives children the right to be protected from being hurt and mistreated in body or mind. And the class rules have been applied to set up a positive, inclusive classroom climate and a safe space of mutual confidence and respect in the teacher-class relationship. So this will mean that children will not be afraid to experiment with the language and take a risk with the language or to make mistakes, because there'll be an atmosphere, a supportive atmosphere, and where mistakes are seen as learning opportunities. They agree to listen to each other and to take turns and to treat each other kindly. So in other words, no ridiculing of each other, no bullying. So the class rules commitment then helps create a safe, positive learning environment and prevent and protect children from potential emotional abuse. Right, my next example is lower secondary. Here we have 12-year-old students in India who were consulted about what they perceive to be challenging, interesting, limiting, and/or essential in their English language teaching materials to better understand their preferences about the ways they want to learn. Now, this example shows again how Article 12 has been applied. Article 12 gives the children the right to give their opinion and for adults to listen and to take their opinions seriously. And the researcher realized that children were not passive consumers at all. They actively think about their materials and are capable of voicing their perspectives if the appropriate language and methods are used. And my final example, another lower secondary, Francophone lower secondary children in an English medium school in Cameroon working on a story writing task. Now, group 1 were observed by the teacher and instructed to complete the task in English. They produced a very short text. Group 2 were left alone to complete the task. The children drew upon their linguistic resources by negotiating content and output in French. They produced a long and comprehensive text in English. And this comes from work by Harry Kucha and Lizzie O'Milligan. And this paper will appear in a forthcoming special issue of System English Medium Instruction in Emerging Contexts. And this shows, it demonstrates how Article 30, another example of Article 30, is being applied. We can see that Group 2 were given agency and choice on how they completed the task. They chose to use French, their own language and default cognitive tool, and co-constructed output in English. This acknowledged their plurilingual identity. And the quality, I think, of their final product compared with group 1 invites us to question the rationale and value of English-only policies. So 5 examples, these 5 examples from very different parts of the world, with children of very different ages, show how children's rights have been implemented in the English language classroom, despite some of those issues and constraints that we've discussed earlier. Children are recognized as rights holders and as active agents in their own learning, and the children are valued for their present perspectives and experiences and as capable of voicing their own views, making choices and decisions and initiating their own learning. This builds children's self-esteem and develops their autonomy and self-expression, and educators become more equitable collaborators with children. These are examples of democratic practices which establish a children's rights culture in the English language classroom. So let's come back to, now we've looked at these examples and many of the activities, I'm sure, and practices, I'm sure you're very familiar with. So would you perhaps change your position on the continuum from what you did earlier, in the hope that perhaps implementing children's rights has become a little bit clearer? Okay, I'm sorry, I cannot see the discussion, so I will have to come back to that later, but I hope you may have been able to re-evaluate your position on this continuum. So what I'm going to do now is to give a brief historical background to learner-centered learning and learner agency. So going right back to Confucius and Socrates, who promoted self-reflection and questioning, critical thinking, reasoning, logic, and autonomy, in other words, learner or agency. And you're probably all familiar with this saying from Confucius: give a man a fish, you feed him for a day; teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. And this, I have to say that this saying really does underpin the philosophy of learning to learn English that I co-authored with Barbara Sinclair back in 1989, the same year as the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, where we say everybody has the right to develop the capacity for taking charge of his or her own learning, and that this development is a basic function of education. Okay, so this is a long time ago, Confucius and Socrates. Coming a little bit more recently, children's rights are embedded in several well-established approaches to education which highlight children's agency. Froebel, Steiner, Montessori, for example, they focused on children's capacities as agents in their own learning, which puts faith in children to demonstrate what they need to learn. And Montessori trusted and respected children as equal partners in learning. In the field of pedagogy and second language learning, we have Dewey, Brunner, Vygotsky, Paulo Freire, Henri Olek, and Francisco Gomes de Matos, a Brazilian, who have greatly contributed to the development of democratic skills in learners and to learners' linguistic and pedagogical rights. Now, I encountered the term learners' linguistic rights back in 1986 in a short article in the EFL Gazette, and it says, the subheading says, Dr. Francisco Gomes de Matos says that without linguistic and pedagogical rights for language learners, we are still far from a truly human approach to language teaching. And this very much sparked my own interest in children's language learning rights. And then in 1995, Francisco Gomez de Matos produced a checklist for children's language learning rights. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these here because they're too small to see anyway, but I will be coming back to children's language learning rights specifically in a minute. And then in 1989, we had the development of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which states that children have a right to be active participants in all matters affecting their lives. And this includes their education and, in our case, their English language learning. And underpinning the convention are the principles of non-discrimination and equality. So we have for every child, every right. This is from UNICEF. And the convention covers three broad areas of rights: provision, protection, and participation. These are often referred to as the 3 Ps. And this convention has become the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history. The child is viewed as a competent and capable contributing social actor who is able to negotiate multiple positionings in the social and cultural world in which they live. This implies that children have the right to exercise agency in the social context of the school and the English language classroom, where decision-making depends on the interdependent and reciprocal relationships between the child and the adult, or the child and the teacher. As we've seen, there are tensions and there are constraints, but it's about children sharing in decision-making and about taking part, not taking charge. So let's move on now and have a look at children's language learning rights. I've organized these into under those 3 broad headings of provision, protection, and participation. And Maria also had some really interesting rights that she showed at the end of her talk. So under provision, children have the right to know the aims and the purpose of their learning activities. This will help make learning explicit and meaningful. They have the right to be given time before they answer a question, so that, you know, that importance of wait time. How many seconds between asking a question do we wait before we expect an answer? Often it's not more than 1 or 2 seconds, which is very, very short. Even 6 or 7 seconds is short, but it can sometimes seem like a long time. But we need to give them this wait time, give them time to think. The right to know how we will be evaluated. Yes, we need to inform children, this is how you will be evaluated, and we need to make sure that they are evaluated fairly, and we need to give constructive feedback that points to areas in their learning that they can work on. For younger children, the right to have an English language area in our classroom where we can play in English, and the right to choose silence and have a quiet space in my classroom. So that's under the heading of provision. Under the area of protection, the right to learn in a safe space, in a positive, inclusive climate where we are all respected. The right to learn in a safe space which is free from any ridiculing or bullying. And this will help children have, the right to have a go, to take a risk and experiment with the language, and the right to make mistakes, because, as I said earlier, mistakes are seen as learning opportunities. And then the third area, which is participation, and we can see this is the largest area. So the right to learn with and from each other and to help each other. the right to choose activities and to choose how we complete them. Carol Reed showed a lovely choice board in her plenary, which is a lovely idea. Give children the opportunity to choose activities and how they complete them, as we saw in that article, that example from Cameroon. The children were given the opportunity to choose how they completed their story writing task. The right to use our own language to help us learn and to prepare for an activity. We saw a couple of activities of that, examples of that. The right to express ourselves in the way we prefer. That could be talking, it could be drawing, it could be writing, photos, video, arts and craft, physical movement, to take into account different learning preferences. The right to use our preferred learning strategies. The right to give our opinions and preferences about language learning and to be involved in decision making. And the right for adults to listen and to act on these. The right not to pronounce perfectly, albeit attaining a comfortable intelligibility, because I think retaining one's accent is so linked to our identity. And the right to ask someone to repeat or to say, we don't understand. So you can see that there are a lot of ways that we can implement children's language learning rights. And I'm sure you are already doing so many of these things. So what I'd like to do now is to move on and to share some resources with you. First of all, this is a lesson plan from the book that I co-authored with Naya Ibrahim, who gave that fantastic talk on children's own languages. And it's all about children creating their own class convention of language learning rights. Now, the general procedures in the lesson plan are for children to talk about their English learning language learning rights and responsibilities. Obviously, if you have rights, it goes with it that you have responsibilities. And to understand the purpose of a convention. And the main outcome then is to produce their own convention of language learning rights. They're given success criteria. Think about your rights and responsibilities when learning English in class. Work together to discuss ideas and complete the sentences. We have the right to and we are responsible for. Here you can see some examples. If you do this activity with your own classes, they may come up with different things. So what happens is that the children in groups of 2 or 3, they think of 2 or 3 English language learning rights they would like to have. They then come together as a class to present and discuss the language learning rights, and they vote for the top 10 to include in their class convention, which they then display in their classroom. And if you look at the bottom bit, as I said, it's if you have rights, it goes without saying that you have responsibilities. So if we have the right to have time before we answer a question, we are responsible for waiting and for not shouting out the answer. So I think this is a very good way of getting children to become respectful of each other. So you could get children to illustrate the class convention. Nikki Joseph in her quiz on Friday evening showed some of these. This comes from, it's a humorous poster, The Rights of the Language Learner. You can download it from the internet. It comes from Be Small Publishing. So that is one lesson. Another lesson that I would like to bring your attention to is entitled Children's Rights. It's by Kate Corey Wright, and you can download the lesson plan and the worksheets from the British Council's Teaching English website. and it's aimed at upper primary children. But I think you could also use it with lower secondary. It's designed to align with the International Day of the Child, which is on the 20th of November, so coming up soon. So this is very timely. And children learn about some of the rights from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. It aims, the lesson aims to teach learners about children's rights, and they also learn the differences between rights and wants. What is a right and what is something that you would like, you want, but it's not essential to your well-being. It develops all 4 skills, as well as creative and critical thinking, and it recycles the use of modals. And the main outcome is to make a booklet to celebrate children's rights. And there's also a short 3-minute film on the British Council's Learn English Kids website, which you might like to share with your children, with your pupils. So there are some lessons that you might like to try out. The next area that I'd like to share with you, how couldn't I not, are picture books that address human rights or children's rights. And I hope you were able to listen to Griselda Beacon's fantastic talk on picture books yesterday. So these are all picture books that address human rights or children's rights and the concept of freedom. So the first one then is For Every Child, published by Red Fox in 2002. Although if you see this link here, UNICEF, you can download a part of this book in a kind of little booklet form for free, obviously. So this takes 14 of the rights or the articles from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and they are written in simplified English. And it's illustrated by illustrators from around the world, including from Britain, Shirley Hughes, Babette Cole, John Birmingham, from the US, from Ireland, the French artist Philippe Dumas, Chilean illustrator Claudio Munoz, Henriette Sauvant from Germany, Indian artists, Satoshi Kitamura from Japan, and Zimbabwe-born Ken Wilson Max. And the illustrations are just beautiful, and they really show an enormous diversity of artistic styles. So each illustrator has illustrated a different right on a double-page spread. So the next one is We Are All Born Free. This is published by Francis Lincoln Children's Books in association with Amnesty International. And it's an illustrated celebration of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Again, it's illustrated by internationally renowned artists, including Axel Scheffler, Peter Siss, Satoshi Kitamura, Alan Lee, Polly Dunbar, Jackie Morris, Chris Riddle, and many more. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was signed on the 10th of December 1948. It was compiled after World War II to declare and protect the rights of all people from all countries. The next one is, as you can probably guess, the cover is illustrated by Oliver Jeffers, and it contains 17 quotations about different aspects of freedom. And they are written in simplified English again. The quotations include people like Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, and Frank Dalai Lama, and Malala Yousafzai. And it's again illustrated by internationally award-winning illustrators, including Alex Deacon, Chris Riddle, and Barou from France, Roger Mello from Brazil, Brigitte Sif from Iceland, the Aboriginal artist Sally Morgan from Australia. Again, it's just such a fantastic collection of illustrations and quotations. Now, Freedom We Sing was PEPELT's, Picture Books in European Primary English Language Teaching, Book of the Month for January 21. It's by Amira Leon and illustrated by Molly Mendoza, published by Flying Eye Books in 2020. It's a poem, and it's been endorsed by Amnesty International to remind us that we're all born free and equal. And it's a poem, and you can find lots of suggestions from the PEPELT team on our website how to use this picture book. Now, the next one, Children Who Changed the World, by Marcia Williams, published by Walker Books in 2020. We discover stories of well-known child activists. And it was published to mark 30 years since the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child was signed by the United Nations General Assembly, and it's endorsed by Amnesty International. And the final one, Mistakes Are How I Learn, by Kiara Wilson. It's independently published in 2021. It's a rhyming story that involves social emotional learning and helps children develop resilience. This helps children understand that they're not alone when facing defeat. Tamara, who we see on the front cover, shares what she does when confronted with challenges. And I think this really fits well with that whole concept of the fact that mistakes are opportunities to learn, but in order to make mistakes, you need to have a safe, inclusive environment. So the final part of the resources then are resources that focus on teacher development. You can use these resources either with student teachers or for in-service teacher development. They come from 2 books published by Delta Publishing, Teaching Children How to Learn, that I co-authored with Nair Ibrahim. And in part C, you have reflective activities which invite teachers to reflect on children's voices, and Article 12 of the Convention, and Article 30, using the mother tongue or shared classroom language. And Teaching English to Pre-Primary Children. This is Sandie Mourão's book, which she very kindly invited me to contribute to. Again, in part C, we have reflective activities on children's rights in general and on using the home language. So to finish, I would like to return to the UNICEF statement. Children's rights generate obligations and responsibilities that we must all honour and respect. So children's rights then need to be incorporated into school curricula, teaching practices and materials. They need to be made explicit in school mission statements, behaviour codes and practices and policies. For example, does your school have a children's rights policy? So implementing children's rights then and respecting children's views is not only good pedagogical practice, but a legally binding obligation and duty for which we are all responsible, whatever age the child. And just to remind you that the International Day of the Child is on the 20th of November. So thank you very much. I've come to the end. As I said, all my references and further reading are here. There are 2 slides of them, but if I think the talk will be available on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, so you'll be able to access them there. So thank you. Let me see if there are any questions. So this is from Maria Boyko. In your opinion, what are the best strategies for protecting learners' linguistic rights in mainstream classrooms? Well, Maria, I hope that the language learning rights that I have given examples of, both through the examples from different parts of the world, and also the ones that I organized under the 3 broad areas of provision, protection, and participation will give you some ideas. But as I said at the end as well, it really does need to be a whole school strategy, a whole school approach. It can't just happen in one teacher's classroom. It needs to be everybody doing it together and working together. And I do know that in mainstream classrooms, obviously, you know, they vary so much around the world, and in some parts of the world, class sizes are so large with up to 80 or more children. So I do appreciate that it isn't easy, but I think we can all take little steps just by giving children choices from time to time, from listening to their points of view, listening to their opinions. So thank you very much, Maria, for asking that question. So I think I have finished.
Well, Gail, thank you so much for that plenary, so important. What an important final plenary of our 6 plenaries in our 6 key strands for this web conference. And it was so rich how you drew on research from all around the world, so many different parts of the world, to show how this can be actualized and is being actualized by practitioners and researchers in different contexts around the world. And such a clear historical overview, bringing us right up to present time, and such useful resources as well. And of course, I really love the Picturebooks, because what amazing vehicles to make understanding of rights accessible to children in a way that's also engaging. Some really useful links there as well, Gail, for those lesson plans as well. So, and I think such an important takeaway message is how you emphasize that this is everyone's responsibility. So all educators all around the world, both in the mainstream sector and the out of school sector, are responsible for respecting and acting on children's language learning rights. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, David.
So Gail's session and all of the sessions will be uploaded in the coming weeks to our YouTube channel, which is freely accessible to all. We're now going to take a break before our next talk, and during the break we're going to hear from our sponsor ELT consultants and their view on this strand, language learners' rights and child protection.